She never meant to sit at that table. Not on that night, not in that blue dress, and certainly not across from the man who would end up changing everything. It started with a simple mistake, a maitre d' pointing her toward the wrong seat, a paperback trembling in her hand, and a smile she wasn't prepared to return. On the outside, she looked calm, collected, just another woman trying her best. But inside, she was one breath away from breaking, because sometimes the scariest moments aren't the loud ones. Sometimes they're the quiet, accidental ones, the ones where life pulls out a chair, looks you in the eye, and asks, "Are you ready for a second chance?" And she never imagined the person waiting for her at that table would be her little boss. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The rain had finally stopped when Laura Bennett stepped out the back door of Briar's table, the November air brushing her face like a reminder that winter wasn't far behind. The sky over Willow Creek held that dull, fading purple that comes after a long day too late to be evening, too early to be night. 10 hours on her feet had turned her lower back into a stiff board, the kind she used to joke about only older folks complaining of. But at 38, she felt every shift in the weather, every extra box of frozen fries she lifted wrong, every night she stayed up too late helping her son finish homework. She held the strap of her worn canvas bag over her shoulder, thinking about the stack of bills waiting at home and whether the electric company would allow one more extension. There was always something: the mortgage, the car insurance, the copay for her son's asthma inhaler. Life had turned into a series of negotiations between her and her job, her and her body, her and the calendar. Her phone buzzed before she reached her car. "Megan?" "Of course," Laura answered with a sigh. "If you're calling to ask me again, my answer's the same. I haven't asked anything yet." Megan's voice was light, teasing, the way only younger sisters could get away with. "But since you're offering, yes, actually, I am calling to ask again." "No, you didn't even let me say it. I don't have to. You've been trying all week." Megan huffed dramatically. "Come on, Lore, it's not a date. It's an event, a gathering, a fun social mixer for grown-ups who've been through a thing or two." That's exactly what makes it sound awful. Laura unlocked her car, dropping into the driver's seat with a heavy exhale. She could still smell the fry oil on her hair. She'd have to shower the minute she got home. "Megan, I'm tired. I didn't even get a lunch break today. And I have to work the Saturday morning rush. I don't have time for whatever second chances is supposed to be." "It's supposed to be an opportunity," Megan replied simply. "For people like you, people who carry too much by themselves." Laura stared out the windshield, watching a cluster of leaves tumble across the empty parking lot. She didn't want opportunities. She wanted rest, stability, a week without worrying if corporate was going to cut hours again, or worse, shutter their location entirely. A rumor had been buzzing through the kitchen for 2 months now. Cutbacks, restructuring, stores being evaluated. When you lived paycheck to paycheck, evaluated was just another way of saying, brace yourself. She rubbed her forehead. "Meg, I can't think about meeting someone. I work, I sleep, I take care of Ethan. That's my life. That's all I have room for. And what about what you want?" Laura's breath hitched not enough to notice, but enough to sting. "What I want doesn't matter right now. It matters to me." Megan's voice softened. "And I know you. You won't sign up on your own, so I already registered you." Laura closed her eyes. "Megan, it's tomorrow at 7, at the Lakeside Hotel downtown, the one that just got renovated. I even picked out your signal, my What Your Signifier. It's a themed thing. Everyone carries an item so their match can find them. You get a worn-out paperback. Romantic. Write Megan. And wear blue." Megan barreled on. "You look good in blue. Makes your eyes pop." Laura leaned her head back against the seat, letting the ceiling of the car absorb her frustration. She and Megan had this argument twice a month. Megan believed in fresh starts, new chapters, doors opening if you knocked long enough. Laura believed in keeping the door shut so the wind didn't come in. "I don't have time for this," Laura murmured. "Yes, you do," Megan said, You just never take it. A pause, long enough for guilt to slip in. Then, please, Laura, just this once. Go. If you hate it, I'll never bring it up again. Laura looked at her hands calloused from years of peeling tape off cardboard boxes, knuckles dry from bleach and sanitizer. These hands had held together a life she'd rebuilt from scraps after her divorce. But they hadn't held another person's hand in years. Meg, she whispered, tired and half-defeated, please. It was the please that did it, not pushy, not manipulative. Just a simple plea from someone who loved her enough to nag her into living. Fine, Laura said quietly. I'll go. Megan squealed so loudly Laura had to pull the phone away from her ear. Yes, okay, 7 o'clock, blue dress paperback, don't be late. Before Laura could protest again, the call ended. She sat there in the stillness of the parking lot, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. A faint ache lingered behind her ribs, not dread, but something softer, unfamiliar. Nerves, maybe, or the strange flutter that comes when you agree to something you don't understand yet. She started the car, watching her own faint reflection in the dark glass of the window. The woman staring back looked strong, steady, and maybe a little lonely. I'm too old for this, she whispered. But tomorrow at 7, she would walk into that hotel anyway, wearing blue, holding a battered paperback, without knowing that she was heading straight toward the youngest boss she'd ever had. And the seat across from him was already waiting. The thought slipped into her mind, uninvited, and stayed there all the way home. Laura arrived 7 minutes late, not because she meant to, but because finding parking around the Lakeside Hotel on a Friday night was like threading a needle in the dark. By the time she stepped through the tall glass doors, her pulse was already too quick, and the heat rising in her face made her regret the blue dress Megan insisted on. It wasn't anything bold, just a simple cotton dress that hit her knees, but it felt louder than she liked. Too hopeful, too unlike her. She clutched the worn paperback in her hand, the spine softened from years of living at the bottom of various handbags. Tonight it felt like a shield, or maybe a prop in a play she hadn't rehearsed for. The lobby glowed with warm, golden lighting that made everything appear softer, more expensive, almost unreal. Willow Creek hadn't had anything this nice in decades. The hotel had been a half-collapsed relic until a developer revived it. Now, it hosted the kind of events Laura only heard about from customers chatting over their salads. A sign by the hallway read in cursive, "Second Chances," private dinner event, lakeside room. Her stomach tightened. The maitre d'. A tall young man with a perfect posture and a perfectly unreadable smile approached her. Good evening, ma'am. Are you here for second chances? Yes. Her voice cracked slightly. Under Bennett. He scanned his list, nodded, then gestured for her to follow. Your companion has already arrived. Companion. The word made her want to turn around, but she followed him through the softly lit dining room, past tables dressed in white linen, past couples leaning close over wine, past the tall windows reflecting the orange shimmer of the lakeside lights. Her heart thudded harder with each step. The maitre d' stopped at a small table tucked near the window. A man sat there, half turned toward the lake, scrolling through his phone with the quiet focus of someone used to working through dinner. A navy blazer lay unbuttoned over a gray t-shirt, casual but intentional. His beard was neatly kept, trimmed short. His dark hair carried a bit of wave, brushed back but not fussed over. Early to mid-40s, maybe. He looked more tired than polished, more real than intimidating, and nothing like the kind of man she expected to be paired with at one of Megan's "you deserve love too" inventions. The maitre d' cleared his throat softly. Your guest has arrived, sir. The man looked up. Their eyes met. For a strange second, Laura saw a flicker of recognition in his expression, like he'd seen her somewhere before. Or maybe it was just the way he studied people, carefully, instinctively. She wasn't sure. He straightened, set his phone aside, and offered an apologetic half-smile. You must be Laura. His voice was warm, low, the kind that could settle a room without trying. She nodded and sat down, grateful her legs obeyed her. She placed the paperback gently on the table. A half-second later, she noticed that he, too, had a book, a hardcover with a bold, businesslike title she didn't quite catch. A book-to-book match. Megan's ridiculous system apparently worked. "It's nice to meet you," the man said. "Hope you didn't have trouble finding the place." "No worse than usual. I'm late, though. Sorry, no problem at all." Something about him felt guarded, not cold, just careful, like someone who had learned to choose his words with precision. She smoothed her napkin, willing her awkwardness to settle. "So, have you been to something like this before?" He huffed out a small laugh. "No, definitely not. My sister signed me up, said I needed to remember how to be human." Her words. Laura cracked a smile. Megan said something similar. They both laughed, but it was the soft, uncertain kind of laugh shared by people who didn't quite know where to place their hands or their hearts. A waiter came, poured water, disappeared. Conversation started slowly, like a car struggling in cold weather. He asked where she worked, and she gave the simple version, 15 years at Breyer's table, climbing from waitstaff to senior floor supervisor because she was too stubborn to quit. She kept the harder truths tucked away. He listened politely, nodding in quiet understanding. Then he mentioned his job, something about travel, long drives, checking on restaurants across Ohio and Pennsylvania. "A lot of locations in our region," he said. "I've been all over lately. Breyer's table kept me busiest this quarter." The fork slipped in her hand. She blinked. You work with Breyer's table work for them," he corrected gently. "Corporate, regional side. I'm based out of Columbus." Her chest tightened. He continued casually, unaware of the invisible shift occurring inside her. "I've been visiting all the stores, talking to staff, reviewing operations, that kind of thing. This last year's been full of changes, promotions, restructuring, leadership turnover, restructuring." The word everyone at her location whispered like it carried teeth. Laura forced a smile, her palms suddenly damp. She cleared her throat. What's your name again?" He offered his hand like this was a normal introduction and not a slow-motion collision. "Eric Langford, Regional Operations Manager." She felt the words hit her all at once. Eric Langford. She had heard that name more times in the last 2 months than she had heard her own. The kitchen crew called him the little boss from head office, youngest regional manager in company history, the one with sharp eyes and sharper expectations. Some staff spoke of him like a storm rolling in from the highway. Others said he was fair but firm. Nobody said he was sitting in a blue-lit hotel waiting for her. Her heartbeat stumbled. He watched her, puzzled. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Laura opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Of all the men in Willow Creek, of all the tables in this hotel, of all the silly, hopeful, stubborn coincidences, she had just sat down across from her boss's boss, the man everyone at work whispered about, the man whose signature determined which locations stayed open. She gripped the paperback tighter. He leaned forward slightly. "Laura, did I say something wrong?" She swallowed hard. The truth pressed against her lips, trembling. I know who you are." His eyebrows rose in confusion, and the room, for a breath, felt too small, for a long moment. Laura forgot how to breathe. Eric blinked at her across the table, waiting for an explanation, unaware that her mind was spinning through every possible worst-case scenario, like a deck of cards dropped on the floor. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the same one she got when a surprise inspector showed up at the restaurant, or when she saw her manager's number flash on her phone after midnight. She straightened in her chair, posture stiffening instinctively. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't be here." Eric frowned gently. "Why not? This is a mistake," she said quickly, standing so fast her knee bumped the underside of the table, rattling the silverware. "I wasn't supposed to be seated here. There must have been a mix-up with the match list." His brows drew together, confusion deepening. "But you're here for second chances. right? Yes. But she swallowed hard. Not with someone from corporate. Corporate, he echoed softly, still trying to fit the pieces together. I'm at Briar's table, she said. I've been there 15 years. And if anyone sees me sitting with you like this, they'll think I'm trying to curry favor or something. Eric's posture changed an almost imperceptible shift, like someone bracing themselves. I didn't know you worked for the chain. I swear, if I had, I know. She cut in. It's not your fault. It's just, I can't do this. He opened his mouth, closed it again, looked down briefly at the book on the table before meeting her eyes. His expression wasn't offended. It was something quieter, something that looked strangely close to regret. Laura, he began gently, I'm not here in any official capacity. I'm not evaluating you. This isn't work. It is to me, she whispered. Their eyes met, and for a split second, she hated that he looked kind. She hated that he looked human, because it would be so much easier if he were one of those executives people whispered about with fear, someone cold and unreachable. But he wasn't. He was just a man sitting at a table, still wearing a navy blazer that didn't quite hide how tired he looked. Just a man who got roped into an event by a loving sister. Just a man caught in the same awkward twist of fate she was. She turned slightly, ready to step away. Wait, he said softly. Not commanding, not corporate, not even particularly confident. Just soft. Please. Laura froze. Eric stood now too, hands loosely at his sides, as though he didn't want to risk intimidating her. There's a lot I don't know, he said slowly. Honestly, tonight was supposed to be simple. A dinner, a chance to sit with someone who isn't asking about quarterly metrics or regional performance. But if this is uncomfortable for you, I understand. He paused. And then, but, we're already here. The food's already ordered. And maybe tonight we don't have to be boss and employee. Maybe we can just be two tired people who showed up because the people who care about us insisted. Something in his voice struck her, not romantic, not forward, just open, unexpectedly open. She hadn't heard that tone in a long time. That small, honest admission that someone else might be just as worn out, just as human. She let out a breath that trembled a little. Eric, she said quietly, this is messy. I know. His mouth twitched into something like a smile. Messy doesn't always mean bad. She sank back into her chair, though her spine stayed rigid. He eased back into his seat as well, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced like someone's trying to keep his hands from fidgeting. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. A moment passed, the kind of moment that feels fragile, like thin ice holding weight. So, he said, clearing his throat lightly, you've been with the company 15 years. That's impressive. She almost laughed. It's a job. It's hard work, he corrected. I know exactly how hard it is. She looked at him, really looked, the tired eyes, the slight slump in his shoulders, the faint creases of someone who spent too much time reading reports in bad lighting. She saw the weight he carried, even if he tried to hide it beneath humor and polite conversation. She opened her mouth to reply, but the waiter appeared suddenly beside them, carrying 2 glasses of wine on a small tray. These are for the second chances pair at table 6, he said brightly. Compliments of the event host. Laura jerked, startled. Eric blinked at the glasses, then at her. The waiter set the wine down with a soft clink. Hope you two enjoy your evening. And he walked away. Silence pressed in, thick enough to feel. Eric placed one hand on the stem of his glass, but didn't lift it. Well, he said, voice low, I guess that answers whether we're a match or not. The implication hovered between them. They had been matched, deliberately, officially. Laura stared at the wine, her fingers curling against the tablecloth. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She didn't believe in fate or serendipity or any of the things happen for a reason, cliches people threw around to feel better. life, in her experience, didn't care about aligning stars. But tonight made her wonder if coincidence sometimes pushed a little harder than usual. Eric watched her with quiet patience. "We don't have to drink it," he offered softly. "We don't have to stay either." Her throat tightened. "We could," he continued. "Just see where the conversation goes. Just tonight. No labels, no job titles, no assumptions." Laura touched the paperback with the tip of her finger, feeling the worn edges, the dog-eared corners. She thought of Megan's hopeful insistence. She thought of her empty living room, her long shifts, her son asleep before she ever got home, and she thought of how unexpectedly comforting Eric's voice had sounded a moment ago. She exhaled slowly. "I don't know if this is a good idea," she whispered. Eric nodded. "Neither do I." Their eyes met again. And just like that, the night shifted, settling into a kind of fragile possibility neither of them had expected. For a moment, neither of them touched the wine. It just sat there between them, catching the warm glow from the hanging lights, as though waiting for someone to claim the evening. Slowly, the stiffness in Laura's shoulders began to ease. She didn't notice the shift at first, just that her breathing felt a little less shallow, her pulse a little less frantic. Maybe it was the soft hum of conversation from other tables, or the way the lake shimmered in the window behind Eric. Or maybe it was simply that he wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding, wasn't acting like the man whose decisions affected hundreds of paychecks. He was just a man sitting across from her. They started with the safe things. Weather, the cold snap Willow Creek wasn't ready for. The way Ohio's autumn always seemed too short. Laura told him about customers who left tips and pennies arranged in smiley faces, teenagers who thought arriving on time meant within a 15-minute window, regulars who ordered meatloaf every Friday like it was a ritual passed down through generations. Eric chuckled at that. "My dad was the same way." He said, "Meatloaf Fridays." Nobody was allowed to touch the TV while he ate. He said it was sacred. "Food rituals usually are," Laura replied, surprised at how easily she answered. The conversation drifted naturally, weaving in and out of small observations. With each passing minute, the air between them loosened like a taut rope slowly unwinding. Eventually, Eric leaned his forearms on the table. "So, tell me what you actually do at your store," he said. "Not the job description version, the real one." She raised an eyebrow. "You really want to know I asked, didn't I?" She took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "Well, I make schedules, or try to. Half the high school crew forgets to check theirs. I train new hires, calm down angry guests, jump in on the grill when the line cooks get overwhelmed. I cover any shift that needs covering because there's always a shift that needs covering." Eric nodded slowly. "I've seen your name on labor sheets, but hearing it like this, it's different." She shrugged. "But it wasn't casual. It's just what managers do." "No," he corrected gently. "It's what good managers do." The compliment landed somewhere deep in her chest, where recognition rarely reached. Most of the praise she received at work was a muttered thanks or a scribbled note on a yearly review written in a hurry. She chose not to linger on it. Instead, she said, "What about you? What is it you actually do, besides checking spreadsheets and scaring half the staff whenever you visit?" He laughed under his breath. "That's fair. Mostly I drive, I review numbers, I talk to store managers, I write emails too long for anyone to read." He paused. "The truth is, I'm trying to understand what's happening in each store, where support is needed, where systems break down, where things can be better. That sounds like a nice version of cut hours where you can," Laura said before she could stop herself. Eric winced, not offended, just reflective. "Sometimes cuts happen, but that's not what I want. I'm trying to fix things, not break them." She studied him a long, searching look that surprised even her. He didn't look like a man who enjoyed taking things from people. His eyes had that worn, thoughtful depth she'd only seen in people who'd had to choose between two bad options too many times. She set her glass down. "You asked what I do. I keep that place alive most days. The fryer breaks, I fix it. A kid quits mid-shift, I rearrange the whole rotation. Someone calls off with a 2-minute text. I'm the one grabbing my coat and driving in. I keep the lights on. Literally. Eric listened with the kind of attention that felt unfamiliar, steady, unbroken, like she wasn't an inconvenience, but a person worth hearing. She kept going, voice quieter now. I've been with Breyer's table longer than some of your reports have been out of high school. His eyes sharpened, subtle but unmistakable. It was the moment something shifted in him. A realization. A weight. Her words had pierced the neat lines on his spreadsheets, slipped under the tidy categories. Suddenly, she wasn't L.T. Bennett, senior floor supervisor, location 214. She was a life, a history, a backbone of a store he was supposed to evaluate. He opened his mouth to respond, but she wasn't finished. My ex left when my son was 10, she said softly, looking down at the tablecloth. He said he was tired of being poor, tired of working so hard and still scraping by. He said he wanted more. Eric's breath caught not loud, but enough that she noticed. Laura continued, voice steady but fragile around the edges. I didn't have the luxury of wanting more. I had a kid, a mortgage, no savings. I learned how to fix a leaking sink from a video at midnight because we couldn't afford a plumber. Worked double shifts so I wouldn't fall behind on the bills. Missed 2 of my son's concerts because no one else could stay to close. She swallowed. I didn't choose to be strong. I chose not to drown. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was reverent. Eric leaned back, exhaling slowly. I had no idea. Most people don't, she said. They see a uniform, not a story. He looked at her, then not like a boss studying an employee, but like a man seeing someone for the first time. Someone real. Someone who had carved her life out of hard choices and quiet resilience. I'm glad you told me, he said softly. Laura looked away, unsure what to do with the warmth creeping into her chest. She wasn't used to being seen truly seen, especially by someone who lived on the other side of the corporate universe. The lake shimmered through the window, small waves catching the last of the hotel lights. She felt exposed, but she didn't feel ashamed, and that, in itself, was terrifying. The next morning, Laura woke with the faint memory of warmth lingering somewhere in her chest, like the echo of a fire that had already burned out. She lay still for a moment, staring at the water stain on her ceiling, not sure how she felt about the night before. It hadn't been a date, not really, no flirting, no promises, just 2 tired people with more in common than either expected, and yet, something about the way Eric had listened, really listened, kept tugging at the edges of her mind. She forced herself out of bed before the thought grew roots. Work. Bills. Ethan's science project. Due Monday. Life didn't slow down for unexpected connections. By 9 a.m. She was back at Breyer's table, tying her apron behind her waist as the familiar hum of morning prep filled the kitchen. The smell of thawing hash browns mixed with the burnt edge of the first pot of coffee. She slipped into her usual rhythm check inventory, review the morning shift, make sure the fryer wasn't making that rattling noise again. Dale, the general manager, lumbered in, holding a clipboard and a to-go cup. Morning, Laura, morning. She didn't look up from checking syrup bottles. Keeping busy kept her thoughts in line. Hey, he said, flipping through his papers. Just a heads up. We've got a regional visit next week. Her hands froze. A what-you-know corporate walkthrough. The new guy's making his rounds. Eric something. Dale squinted, tapping his temple. Lang something. You probably know the name. Laura's heartbeat stumbled. I've heard it. Heard he's sharp. Heard he's tough. Dale shrugged. He's the youngest regional ops we've ever had. Corporate must love him. Anyway, they're saying there might be 2 closures within 50 miles. Not confirmed, but he lifted his eyebrows meaningfully. Cold washed through her. 2 closures, she asked quietly. Rumors. He waved a hand. We'll be fine. I mean, probably. Our sales dip. Sure, but we're not the worst. Probably not the worst. Not exactly comforting. Laura forced a smile and turned away before he could see the panic settling in her chest. She focused on filling syrup bottles until the sticky smell made her nauseous. She didn't want to think about Eric, didn't want to imagine him in a different light, didn't want to wonder if the man who sat across from her last night, soft-spoken, attentive, would walk through the doors next week to quietly tally up the reasons her job wasn't worth saving. She swallowed the burn rising in her throat. "He's not your friend," she told herself. "He's corporate. You should have remembered that." By noon, the lunch rush had swallowed every thought except orders, complaints, and refills. It was only once the last customer left and the servers were wiping down tables that she slipped into the tiny back office to print next week's schedule. The office was barely a room, more of a storage closet with a desk shoved in. A computer hummed under a stack of invoices. Dale's coffee mug, stained from years of use, sat next to a half-eaten granola bar. Laura sat down and clicked the mouse to wake the screen. Dale must have stepped out to check on the grill because his email was still open, something he never remembered to close. Laura didn't look at it. She never did. Privacy mattered, even here. But then a new message pinged at the top of the inbox, bold and impossible to ignore. Subject candidate list, possible closures. Briar's table, number 14 under review. Her store number, but 14, Willow Creek. Her hand froze on the mouse. She didn't mean to click, didn't mean to read, but her eyes moved before she could stop them. The email was short, clinical, corporate, pending final review, sales metrics below regional average, labor cost concerns, facility condition aging, recommendation evaluate for possible closure. Q1, and beneath that, in the small italicized text indicating who forwarded it, was a name. Eric Langford. The room tilted. Her breath cut off. She leaned back, fingers curling tight around the edge of the chair. So that was it. The warmth of last night, the softness in his eyes, the open listening, all while her job, her store, her entire livelihood was sitting in some corporate chain of emails marked under review. She swallowed hard, blinking against the sting building behind her eyes. Of course this was how it went. Bosses with polite smiles, bosses who talked about improvements and restructuring, bosses who told stories about their dads and meatloaf Fridays, bosses who, at the end of the day, still had the power to decide whether her rent got paid or her lights stayed on. Her voice came out as a whisper, raw and scratched. Of course. That's what bosses do. A bitter laugh escaped her. They smile at you and then shut you down. The words felt like a bruise spreading under her ribs. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the linoleum, heart beating too fast. She needed air, needed out, needed to forget his voice, his face, the way he'd said. Messy doesn't always mean bad. He didn't know her store was on the list, didn't know she'd seen the email, didn't know she was standing in a tiny office trying to force down a rising wave of anger and fear. But he would know soon enough, and she didn't know whether to run from him or confront him. Either way, everything between them had just changed. The wind cut sharp across the parking lot that morning, cold enough to sting through Laura's jacket as she unlocked the front doors of Briar's table. The sun wasn't fully up yet, only a faint wash of gray-blue behind the clouds. She could already feel the tension sitting between her shoulders, a knot that hadn't loosened since the moment she saw the email. Today was the visit. She tried not to think of him stepping through the doors wearing a corporate windbreaker and a different version of the face she'd seen at dinner. Tried not to think of how easily warmth had turned to warning. Tried unsuccessfully to separate the man she spoke to last night from the man whose name sat on the closure memo. Dale arrived at 7 with an extra-large coffee and the energy of a man trying very hard not to panic. "Big day," he said, voice too bright. "Yep," Laura replied, tying her apron a little tighter. By 8, the breakfast crowd had started trickling in. The teenage hostess was juggling menus and nervous glances toward the front door. Every server tried to stand a little straighter, move a little quicker. The kitchen buzzed with an anxious rhythm. Then, at 8:34, the glass door opened. Eric stepped inside. Corporate clipboard, Breyer's table-issue jacket, tired eyes, a man performing his role. For a split second, his gaze locked with hers. Nothing in his face revealed what he was thinking. Nothing in hers did either. She broke eye contact first. He nodded professionally. Morning, Ms. Bennett. Good morning, Mr. Langford. Her voice was steady, cool, stripped of anything personal. Last night mentally, emotionally evaporated between them like breath on cold glass. He started his walkthrough immediately. Temperature logs, grill calibration, freezer organization. Dale hovered like a shadow, answering questions too quickly, sweating through his shirt. Laura kept working, efficient, controlled. She helped the new kid portion waffle batter, fixed the jammed receipt printer, double-checked the morning deliveries. She avoided being within 3 feet of Eric unless necessary. Even then, she offered nothing more than clip professionalism. Still, she caught him glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. He watched how she directed the team calm, quiet gestures, how the staff leaned into her presence like it anchored them, how she memorized every table's order without writing a thing down, how she smoothed over tiny fires before they sparked. None of that appeared in spreadsheets. Around 10:15, the restaurant hit its mid-morning lull. Only a few tables remained occupied, most of them retirees sipping coffee. A teenage server named Josh brought a plate of steak and eggs to a man seated near the window. The man poked the steak with his fork. "This is overcooked." "I'm sorry, sir," Josh stammered. "I can have the kitchen I asked for. Medium," the man snapped, voice rising. Josh stepped back, startled. It looks medium to me. But are you calling me a liar?" The man stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Several customers turned to look. Josh's face drained of color. Laura was moving before she knew she'd moved. She stepped between them, calm but firm. "Sir, I'm Laura, the supervisor on duty. Let me fix this for you." "I'm not talking to him anymore," the man said, pointing sharply at the trembling teenager. "That's okay," Laura said, voice gentle, steady as a hand on a shoulder. "I'll take care of it. Let's get you a new one." "I don't want a new one," he barked. "I want people here to do their jobs." Laura didn't flinch. "We're going to make this right. But first, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice. Josh is new. He's learning. We all were once." The man blinked, thrown off by her calmness. She continued, tone warm but unyielding. "You deserve a meal cooked the way you ordered, and our staff deserves to be spoken to with respect. Let me fix the order. You sit down, take a breath, and I'll bring it out myself." The man's shoulders dropped a fraction, pride deflated, anger diluted. He muttered, "Fine," and sank back into his seat. Laura carried the plate to the kitchen, breathing out only when she passed through the swinging doors. 2 minutes, she told the cook. "Let's give him our best medium." Josh appeared beside her, face flushed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean stop," she said, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. "You handled it fine." "Some people come in angry at the world. Don't carry their load on your back." Josh nodded, swallowing hard. When she turned, Eric stood in the doorway. He had witnessed everything. Their eyes met, really met for the first time that day. And in his gaze was something she didn't expect: respect. Recognition, something he tried to hide but couldn't. "You handled that," he said quietly. "Better than half the managers I've trained." She didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't let him see the small tremor in her fingertips. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye. "Does that help keep our doors open?" "Mr. Langford." The question hit him like a physical blow, brief, sharp, undeniable. He didn't answer, and the silence between them, tight, charged, full of everything unspoken, was louder than any words could have been. The highway stretched out in a long, empty ribbon, the white lines flashing beneath Eric's headlights like a heartbeat he could never quite match. Ohio, in late fall, looked washed out and tired, the fields a muted brown, the sky low and heavy. He had driven this stretch so many times he could predict every convenience store, Every billboard, every pothole. The silence inside the rental car wasn't peaceful. It was thick, restless, the kind that made a man feel older than his 45 years. He hadn't slept well since the dinner at the hotel, since the moment Laura Bennett looked at him like a stranger the next morning, like he was the kind of man who smiled at you while holding a knife behind his back. Maybe he was. The thought bit deeper than he expected. He checked into another motel, the kind with stiff sheets that smelled faintly of bleach, where the vending machine in the lobby was always out of Diet Coke and the ice machine worked only when it felt like it. Room 214 looked exactly like the dozens before it. Same faded carpet, same sagging mattress, same hollow beige walls. He tossed his suitcase on the chair, loosened his tie, and sat on the edge of the bed. His shoulders ached from hours of driving. His stomach ached from the microwaved lasagna he'd had at some gas station for lunch. His heart ached in a way he refused to name. Work first. Always work first. He opened his laptop. The cold glow lit his face, sharpening the lines that had deepened over the past few years. Spreadsheets appeared, rows and rows of numbers, margins, cost indexes, labor percentages. He'd been living inside these grids so long, he sometimes forgot they represented real places, real people. His eyes landed on the regional dashboard. Store, Unio 14 Briars Table, Cedar Falls, yellow, borderline, not red enough to scream failure, not green enough to guarantee survival, just fragile. He could see it clearly. Yellow cells forming a warning, a quiet plea he wasn't sure he had permission to answer. His phone buzzed. He didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. Conrad Pierce, his superior, a man who believed compassion was a luxury and sentimentality was a disease. Eric took a steadying breath and answered, "Langford, Eric, quarters ending fast. We need 2 closures confirmed this week." His stomach dropped. 2? I thought we were reviewing. "We reviewed," Conrad cut in. "Margins tell a story. We follow it. You know which stores make sense. Send me your recommendations tonight." Eric swallowed. "I'm still evaluating." "No time. Don't get sentimental. Langford, numbers don't care about feelings. Neither should we." The call ended abruptly. Eric stared at the screen, jaw tight. "Don't get sentimental." He leaned back against the headboard, letting his eyes fall shut. But he was sentimental. Too much. More than he'd ever admit in a boardroom. And for the first time in years, someone from a spreadsheet had a face, a voice, a story. Laura, sitting across from him in that dim, warm hotel restaurant, talking about raising a 10-year-old boy alone, working double shifts to keep the lights on, fixing broken sinks herself, carrying the place his store on her back. Her life was woven into the yellow cells in front of him. He opened a different window, the file on her store's performance. Declining revenues, yes. Labor costs too high, true. Building repairs overdue, very true. Competition from 2 new chains, undeniable. It all made sense on paper, but paper didn't capture the way she calmed down an angry customer with nothing but grace and steadiness. Paper didn't show the loyalty of a staff that looked at her like she anchored the whole ship. Paper didn't show the look she gave him when she asked, "Does that help keep our doors open?" He rubbed his face with both hands. How many lives had he disrupted in the name of margins? How many people had he never spoken to before, approving closures that uprooted entire towns? He thought back to his own family. The divorce that blindsided him 3 years ago. The daughter in college now who answered his texts once a week, sometimes once a month. The way his ex-wife said, "You work more than you live. Eric, one day you'll look up and realize you built everything except a life." He didn't have room to argue with her. He didn't have a life. He had roads, motels, ledgers. He returned to the spreadsheet, the blinking cursor waiting. The directive was clear: 2 stores, and his region only had 2 yellow stores. Store number 9 and Store de Reforensning. He hovered over the recommendation field for Store de Reforensning. His hand felt heavy, as if it understood the weight of what he was about to do. He typed slowly, "Store de Reforensning, Recommended for closure pending final review. He stared at the sentence. Long enough to hope it might erase itself if he didn't look away. But it stayed. His finger hovered over the send button. He thought of the teenage boy who depended on Laura's shifts, the staff who looked at her like a shield, the customers she protected, the quiet strength in her voice, the pain she carried without letting the world see it. He pressed send. The confirmation ping felt like a punch. Guilt swept through him, sudden and sharp, hitting deeper than he'd expected. He closed the laptop slowly, as if afraid a small movement might crack something inside him. He lay back on the stiff motel pillow, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater and the faint drip of something in the bathroom. He shut his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, a number on a spreadsheet kept him awake. Somewhere in the darkness between the hums and the guilt, a whisper rose, uninvited. "What have you just done?" "Eric." And he had no answer, not one he liked. By Thursday morning, the air inside Briar's table felt charged, as though even the flickering fluorescent lights sensed something coming. Laura moved through the dining room with her usual calm efficiency, but every step carried a weight she couldn't shake. Every sound seemed sharper, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the grill, the distant buzz of the soda machine. Eric was coming back today. Follow-up observations, Dale had said, making finger quotes like he didn't believe a word of it. Laura believed even less. Truth was, she already knew the answer. People don't run follow-up visits on stores doing fine. She wiped down a counter for the third time. Her movements clipped. Her chest felt tight. Her thoughts louder than the morning rush. The email she'd seen on Dale's monitor kept replaying like a cruel loop, each line sharper than the last. Store, number 14, under review, possible closures within 50 miles. Langford in the chain. At 9:10, the front door chimed. Eric stepped in. Corporate jacket, clipboard, expression guarded enough to be a wall. Laura didn't greet him. Dale did, stumbling over his words in his eagerness to impress. Eric nodded, distracted, but his eyes kept drifting toward her quick glances, almost apologetic. She ignored him, or tried. 20 minutes later, while she was stacking cups in the back, she sensed him approaching the break room. She followed, carrying a stack of menus she didn't actually need to put away. Her heartbeat was a dull, steady drum beneath her ribs. No more avoiding, no more polite silence. When he pushed open the break room door, she slipped in behind him and closed it before he could turn. The room was barely bigger than a closet. A wobbly round table sat crooked in the center, one leg shimmed with folded cardboard. The soda machine hummed loudly in the corner, vibrating just enough to rattle a stack of plastic cups. Eric froze halfway through taking off his jacket. Laura stood near the door, arms crossed, shoulders stiff. "Just tell me the truth." He blinked. "About what? Are we on some list?" Her voice didn't tremble, if anything. It was too steady. That dangerous steadiness people have when their heart is breaking and they won't let anyone see it. Eric swallowed. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Corporate training rose up like a reflex. Never discuss pending closures. Legal guidelines followed. All decisions must go through formal channels. HR voice whispered, "Stay vague, stay neutral, stay safe." But beneath all of that, his conscience whispered something else, something quieter, older and harder to ignore. Tell her the truth. She stepped closer, eyes sharp. "I'm not asking for a speech or a corporate statement. I'm asking, am I about to lose the job I've had for 15 years? Her voice cracked not with tears, but with exhaustion. He wanted to look away. Couldn't. "Laura." He began. "No." She cut in. "Don't soften it. Don't spin it. Just tell me." The soda machine hummed louder, filling the silence he didn't know how to break. Finally, slowly, painfully, he said, "Yes, you're under review." Her breath left her as if someone had punched it out. He tried to add something, anything. "Nothing's final yet. It's just..." "Oh," she whispered. Just that one word, small, bruised, final. She blinked hard, her gaze dropping to the wobbly table. Her hand rested on it for balance. My mortgage, she whispered, almost to herself. My son's tuition, health insurance. She let out a small exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. All sitting in some little yellow square on your spreadsheet. Laura. It's not like that, he said quickly, stepping forward. Oh, her eyes snapped back to his, full of hurt. Then tell me, what is it like? Because from where I'm standing, you had dinner with me the night before you decided my store might be disposable. His chest tightened. That dinner had nothing to do with this. Really? Her voice rose. Because it sure feels like reconnaissance. Learn the sad story, listen to the single mom, nod along, and then hit send anyway. He flinched as if she'd struck him. No, Laura, that is not what happened. Then what did happen? She demanded, voice sharp with betrayal. Because I sat across from someone who seemed decent, honest, someone who wasn't just another corporate ghost. And then I come in here and find out he's recommending shutting down the only steady thing in my life. Her throat worked. She blinked quickly, furious at herself for the wetness gathering in her eyes. Eric's voice dropped, low and rough. That dinner was the first time in months I felt like a human being and not a job description. She stared at him, startled by the vulnerability in his tone, but hurt is heavier than empathy, at least at first. And what am I supposed to do with that? She whispered. What good does it do me that you felt human while deciding something that could destroy my life? He opened his mouth, but no words came. Silence filled the small room. Heavy, suffocating. Her next words landed gently, but cut deeper than yelling ever could. My life is not a line item on your report, Mr. Langford. Laura. He tried, her name breaking in his throat. She stepped around him, hand shaking as she reached for the door. But I guess that doesn't matter, she said quietly. Then she left before he could say anything more, before the apology that wasn't enough, before the guilt that was already pulling at him like undertow. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click, and Eric was alone in the humming break room, staring at a wobbly table that suddenly felt steadier than he did. Laura barely remembered driving home that night. Her hands had been shaking on the steering wheel the whole way, breath catching in her throat every few minutes as if her body kept trying to remind her, you're in danger. Your life could fall apart. But somewhere between the rumble of the car heater and the dark stretch of road leading to her small rental house, the shaking turned into something steadier. Resolve. She had lived through worse. She had been left before. She had built everything she had from the ground up, and she wasn't about to let one spreadsheet undo 15 years of grit, sweat, and showing up on days she could barely stand straight. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after her son had gone to bed. Bills spread out, receipts, old shift notes, customer feedback cards. She flipped through each one slowly, the same way someone might turn pages of a memory book. There was Carmen, a dishwasher, and single mom who worked nights so she could be with her toddler during the day. There was Travis, a high school senior, saving every spare dollar for electrician school. There was Mark, their line cook, 8 months sober, counting on routine and accountability to stay steady. There was the older couple who came in every Wednesday at 4 p.m. sharp, ordering the same meatloaf plate and leaving handwritten jokes on the back of the check. This place wasn't a number. It wasn't yellow on a chart. It was a lifeline. By sunrise, Laura had 3 cups of coffee in her and a stack of receipts organized with the precision of a woman with everything to lose. She didn't sleep much, but she didn't need sleep. She needed a plan. The next morning, she walked into Breyer's table with something new in her posture, steel under softness. Dale glanced at her, surprised by the purpose in her eyes, but he didn't ask questions. At 7:40, she spotted Eric through the front windows, sitting in his car with the engine running, forehead resting against the steering wheel. He looked worn, human, almost as scared as she felt. Good. Maybe that meant there was something left to fight for. She walked outside and tapped on his window. He startled, then rolled it down slowly. Laura, look. About last time, I'm not here to rehash that, she said. I need 5 minutes. Inside, now. Neutral ground. He blinked at the authority in her voice. Of course. They sat in a booth by the window, the same one where local families always crowded on Sunday mornings after church. The same booth where teenagers whispered secrets over milkshakes. The morning light made patterns across the table, soft and warm, at odds with the tension knotting her stomach. Laura placed the stack of receipts and napkin notes on the table between them. Eric stared. What's all this lives? She said simply, in case the spreadsheet didn't show them. He hesitated, then reached for the first note. The handwriting was shaky but heartfelt. Thank you for always treating my son with kindness. He struggles sometimes, but you make him feel safe. Eric swallowed. Laura continued, her voice steady, though every word cost her. These are the people who count on this place. Not for food, though, yes, sometimes that too. They count on us for routine, for stability, for one corner of their life that doesn't fall apart. He listened, really listened, and these, she added, sliding the receipts toward him, are the numbers behind the stories. I know where we're wasting money. I know which specials work and which don't. Give me a chance to show you that we can turn this place around. Eric rubbed the back of his neck. Laura, plans like this, they're usually... She reached into her apron and pulled out 2 laminated menus, flipping them to the blank backside. Then, let's make it usual. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then, without a word, he pulled out a pen. For a moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft scratch of pen on plastic. They started small, waste reduction tracking portions, reworking prep cycles, community events, church potlucks, trivia nights, senior breakfasts, marketing flyers at the high school, partnerships with local clinics, then bolder ideas. What if we introduced a rotating local favorite menu, Laura suggested. Let regulars vote on dishes each month. Eric raised his brows. That's actually good. Write it down, she said. He did. What if we redo the kids' menu he offered? Simpler items, fewer ingredients, faster turnaround. She nodded. Better for everyone. They filled one menu, then the back of another. Soon the table was covered with old notes, half-drawn charts, and tiny arrows pointing to handwritten ideas. It wasn't polished, it wasn't corporate, but it breathed, it lived. At one point, Eric leaned back, staring at the messy pile of ideas. When's the last time someone in my position sat down with someone in yours like this? Never, she said without looking at him. That's the problem. He looked at her. Then not the way a regional boss looked at an employee, but the way one tired, flawed human looks at another who's fighting like hell. Laura, he said softly, if you're willing to stand behind this plan, I'll back it, I'll present it with you. We'll try. She looked up slowly, searching his face for insincerity, for corporate polish, for the slightest hint of pity. She found none. So, we're doing this together, she asked. He nodded. Together. For the first time in days, something warm loosened in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but something like possibility. Their eyes met across the cluttered table. Partners, uneasy, uncertain, but partners. Outside, the town slowly woke. Cars passed. The first customers of the day pulled into the lot. Life kept moving. Inside, at a booth by the window, 2 people who were never meant to be on the same side began fighting for the same future, and neither of them fully understood how much that would change. The drive to the regional headquarters took nearly 2 hours, most of it along rolling stretches of farmland and clusters of bare November trees. Eric handled the wheel. Laura watched the scenery blur past, her thoughts as restless as the shifting sky. They hadn't spoken much during the first 20 minutes, not out of discomfort, but something quieter, like both were still adjusting to this unfamiliar territory. 2 people who, a week ago, were practically strangers. Two people who, a few days ago, were on opposite sides of a near war. And now, here they were, traveling together to defend a small-town restaurant as if it was a living thing. At mile 42, Laura finally broke the silence. Do corporate buildings always look like they want to apologize for existing? Eric glanced over, this one especially. She cracked a small smile. They were on steadier ground than before, but still cautious. Like walking across a frozen pond, neither of them trusted entirely. By the time they arrived at the gray stone building, the sun was already sliding down behind the skyline of the mid-sized city. They spent the next 6 hours in a small conference room with fluorescent lights and stale air, hunched over spreadsheets, projections, reformatted tables, and what felt like endless cups of bad coffee. Laura had never been inside a headquarters before. She'd expected something sleek and impressive. Instead, everything felt strangely hollow. Rooms where decisions were made, but no customers walked in. No servers balanced plates. No cooks swore under their breath during rush hour. More than once, she caught Eric watching her as she worked, admiring, maybe, or simply surprised at how quickly she understood the numbers. She didn't mention it. Neither did he. When the last report was saved and the lights in the hallway dimmed, Eric closed his laptop and rubbed his eyes. "You hungry?" Laura hesitated. "There's a diner near the freeway." He stopped her. "I meant here. The hotel restaurant, together." Her first instinct was to retreat, to remember the last dinner, the shock, the warmth, the betrayal, but something about the way he asked, voice low and hopeful, softened the resistance rising in her. She nodded. "Yeah, we can sit." They walked down to the restaurant on the first floor. It wasn't fancy, just comfortable soft lighting, dark wood, a wide window overlooking the city street where headlights drifted like slow-moving fireflies. The hostess led them to a small corner table by the window, just like the first time. But this time, nothing about it was an accident. Once seated, neither spoke right away. They both stared at the menus as if the words on the page were in another language. Finally. Eric exhaled with a short laugh. "You know," he said, "I still think your fries were better than any we've served in the rest of the region." Laura lifted a brow. "You've only visited half of them, and I stand by my statement." Her smile widened, small but real. It did something to his face, softened it, brightened it, made him look a little younger. They ordered simple dishes, grilled chicken for her, soup, and a sandwich for him. Nothing fancy, nothing stressful, just food for two people who had used up all their energy fighting spreadsheets all day. Conversation started slow, but flowed naturally. They talked about aging parents, Laura's mom in assisted living, Eric's father, who kept forgetting where he put his hearing aids. They talked about grown kids, her son preparing for community college, his daughter, who texted back only when she needed something, but he answered anyway. They joked about impossible corporate slogans printed on flyers neither of them had ever believed in. "Hospitality grows here," Laura quoted, rolling her eyes. "Who wrote that?" Eric chuckled. "Someone who's never worked in a real kitchen." The waiter brought warm bread. They both reached for the basket at the same time, and their hands brushed barely, lightly, but enough to make them both freeze for a second. A soft, electric pause settled between them. Laura pulled her hand back quickly. "Sorry? No," he said quietly. "Don't be." And just like that, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. They ate for a while in comfortable silence, the kind that shouldn't have been possible between two people who had clashed so sharply days earlier. But here they were, sharing air, sharing space, sharing the fragile quiet between battle and whatever came next. After a few minutes, Eric set down his fork, gaze drifting out the window. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't said to anyone at work?" Laura looked at him carefully. "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, shoulders sinking slightly as if admitting this cost him something. "I don't really have friends in this job. I have colleagues, people who want something from me, people who watch every move I make, but not Not someone I can sit across from and just be me. His voice cracked on the last word, so softly she wasn't sure he heard it himself. Laura felt something tug inside her, something she hadn't expected. I know that feeling, she said quietly. I've spent so long being the strong one, the fixer, the shift coverer, the calm voice that I forget what it feels like to let someone else carry a little of the weight. He studied her, expression open in a way she hadn't seen before. And now, she didn't look away. Maybe I'm remembering. The waiter cleared their plates. They both thanked him in the same tone, polite, warm, tired, which made them smile at each other without meaning to. Outside, the streetlights flickered. Inside, the table between them felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Eric's voice dropped. Laura, I don't want to cross any lines. And I know things are complicated. But tonight, he paused, searching for words. Tonight felt like something I haven't had in a long time. Laura's fingers brushed the edge of the bread plate. I felt it too. Another silence, soft, charged, the kind that lingered in the air like an unanswered question. When they finally stood to leave, the space between them felt different, warmer, closer, more dangerous. In the elevator, neither spoke. But when the doors opened, and they stepped into the quiet hallway lined with faded carpet, they paused at a fork, her room to the right, his to the left. Eric whispered, "Good night, Laura." Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. "Good night, Eric." They walked their separate ways, but both kept glancing back. Something had changed, something both of them felt, something neither dared name yet, and neither one was willing to let it go. Morning light filtered through the tall glass windows of the regional headquarters, painting long gold stripes across the lobby floor. Laura had never been inside a place so polished and so cold at the same time. Marble floors, chrome fixtures, walls covered with framed mission statements written by people who had probably never cleaned a fryer or worked a double shift in their life. Eric walked half a step ahead of her, holding a binder under his arm. He looked composed, suit pressed, shoulders straight, but she could see the small betrayals in his posture, the tightness in his jaw, the slight tremor in one hand. He wasn't just bracing for a meeting, he was bracing for judgment. They reached the boardroom doors, dark wood, too tall, closing them off from everything familiar, the kind of doors that felt final. Eric paused, ready. "No," she said quietly, "but I'm here." He offered a faint smile. "That's enough." They stepped inside. A long table stretched the length of the room, lined with executives in tailored suits, laptops open, pens aligned perfectly on notepads. A faint but persistent hum from the fluorescent lights above the table made the air feel sharper somehow. Conrad Pierce sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes cool and unreadable. "Mr. Langford, Ms. Bennett," he said with a polite nod. "Let's make this efficient. We have a full agenda." Laura took her seat beside Eric. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. But when she looked at the napkin in her pocket, the one with the scribbled names of regulars, something inside her steadied. Eric opened the meeting. He walked them through the profit margins, the cost trends, the regional comparisons. His voice was even rehearsed, executive clean, but every so often he glanced at Laura. Small checks, silent reassurances. Then it was her turn. She stood, and the room shifted. Executives leaned back, arms crossing, some raised brows, others looked uninterested. Just another long-term employee fighting for a losing cause. But Laura didn't look at them. She looked at one point on the wall, just above their heads, the place her nerves couldn't reach. "We're not failing," she began. "We're surviving, barely, but with purpose." She paced herself. Breath, words, breath. She told them about the church group that met at the restaurant every Sunday and ordered extra pie so the teenagers working the shift could take home tips. She told them about the traveling nurses who stopped in every weekend, exhausted, grateful for a warm place to sit. She told them about the dishwasher who relied on consistent hours to keep her young son enrolled in daycare. She told them about the line cook fighting every day to stay sober, who said the kitchen gave him a reason to wake up in the morning. She didn't embellish, she didn't perform, she just told the truth. Even the executives who looked bored earlier leaned forward. Something about the way she spoke, calm, honest, unwavering, held the room in place. Eric stepped in at the perfect moment, clicking to a slide filled with charts and graphs. Based on our projections, he said, with the changes we're proposing on cost efficiencies, community engagement, and revised staffing cycles, Store in the Butter 14 can reach target profitability within a year. A murmur ran through the table. Laura exhaled. Eric's voice steadied her like an anchor. Conrad glanced between them. "Ms. Bennett," he said, fingers tapping lightly. "You understand we are not a charity. Emotion is not a business model." She lifted her chin. "Human beings are not liabilities." Silence. A long, heavy one. Then the executives leaned in, whispering among themselves. Laura's stomach twisted. Eric remained still beside her, hands clasped, eyes fixed straight ahead. Minutes ticked by, slow and merciless. Finally, Conrad cleared his throat. "All right," he said. "Here is the board's decision." Laura stopped breathing. "We will keep store number 14 open for a 1-year trial period. Your plan will be evaluated quarterly. If targets are not reached, closure will proceed." A tremor of relief passed through Laura so quickly she almost sank into her seat. But Conrad wasn't finished. "In exchange," he continued, "we are implementing a regional consolidation. We are eliminating one regional manager position. This will streamline oversight and reduce costs." Eric's eyes sharpened. "Which position?" Conrad didn't blink. "Yours." The words dropped like a stone into a still lake. Laura felt the air leave her lungs. "Mr. Langford," Conrad said calmly. "You may step down or move sideways into a non-senior field role. Your territory will be absorbed by other regions." Shock rippled through the room. Even some board members looked surprised by the bluntness. Laura turned to Eric, horror tightening her throat. Eric, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking straight at Conrad. And in his eyes, there was something she hadn't seen before. Something quiet and fierce. "Let me be clear," he said, voice calm but carrying weight. "If stepping down is what keeps that store open, if that's what protects the people in it, then consider my decision made." A stunned silence swept across the table. Conrad raised a brow. "You're choosing downward mobility for a single location." "No," Eric said. "I'm choosing it for the people who rely on that location." Laura felt something in her chest pull tight, hard, breaking, maybe, or opening. Eric added softly, without looking at her. "Some things are worth more than career ladders." Even Conrad had no comeback for that. The decision was final. The meeting adjourned, chairs scraped back, papers gathered, executives left in pairs, whispering behind hands. Laura and Eric stayed seated, the tension thick around them. She finally whispered, "You didn't have to do that." He looked at her, then a soft, exhausted, honest look. "Yes," he said gently, "I did." Laura felt the room tilt, not from fear, from something far more dangerous, something she wasn't ready to name. Not yet. The email went out on a Tuesday morning, quiet and unceremonious, regional realignment complete, new district allocations attached. But when Laura saw Eric's new title, District Support Manager, something in her chest tightened. Fewer stores, less authority, more driving, probably, but also closer. His new territory sat like a gentle ring around her small Ohio town. It wasn't a promotion. Yet, when he walked into store in the Pier 14 that afternoon, wearing the same navy jacket but with a different posture lighter, almost unburdened, she wondered if maybe it was something better. "Morning," he said, stepping through the door as the chime dinged overhead. His voice was the same, but something around him had shifted, like a man who'd stepped out of a storm. "Morning," she replied, clipboard in hand. They held eye contact for half a beat too long before she cleared her throat and called the crew together. Everyone filed into the dining area. Dale, the line cooks, the high school kids still smelling faintly of hairspray, the dishwasher with her hair tied up in a bright bandana. Laura stood near the drink station, palms slightly damp, though she couldn't tell if it was nerves or relief. "Okay, everyone," she began, sweeping her gaze across the group she had protected and coached for years. "We have news? Real news?" The chatter quieted. Even the soda machine seemed to hum softer. "We've been given a 1-year extension. Store number of 14 stays open. It only took 1 second. Then the room erupted. Cheers, tears, arms thrown around necks. Even stoic Dale slapped the counter and muttered, "Damn right we deserve that." Someone hugged Laura so tightly she lost her breath. Another person shouted, "Free pie to celebrate," and someone else immediately yelled, "Not the chocolate one that's mine." She laughed, wiping at her eyes before the tears could betray her. But she didn't tell them the rest. What it cost. Who made the choice that turned the scales? Her gaze drifted across the room. Eric stood near the back, leaning lightly against a booth. He wasn't smiling broadly, but there was a softness to him, a quiet pride as he watched her store come alive again. Their store. The next few months moved like a rhythm, returning to a song that had almost been forgotten. They implemented the plan piece by piece. Thursday nights became community nights, and families who hadn't stepped inside in years returned for meatloaf specials and quilting club raffles. The traveling nurses got free coffee and a place to rest without being rushed. The veterans discount brought in older regulars who liked to linger and tell stories that made the teenagers' eyes widen. The church group tripled in size and tipped well, turning slow nights into steady ones. Bit by bit, the store numbers crept upward. Not a miracle, just work. But the kind of work that felt worthwhile. Eric visited often, but not in the old regional manager way with clipboards and stiff notes. He stopped by with small things, extra gloves for the dish pit, a new thermometer probe, an idea scribbled on a post-it about food cost reductions. Sometimes he stayed only 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sometimes he sat with Laura in the back office, both of them talking through problems with their heads bent over the same spreadsheet. It felt natural, somehow, easier than it had any right to be. One evening, after a particularly good quarter, the best in years, the crew found boxes of steaming pizza stacked on a corner table. "What's this for?" One of the teenagers asked, eyes huge. Eric shrugged, casual. You turned a corner, thought that deserved carbs. Cheers went up again, people grabbed slices, napkins were passed. Music from someone's phone buzzed softly through the dining room. Laura watched them, her little mismatched team gathered around tables pushed together in a crooked line, laughing, eating, living like people who believed they had a future again. When most of the staff drifted out into the night, full and tired, she returned to the dining area to collect paper plates and crumpled napkins. Eric was still there, sitting at one end of the long, makeshift table, leaning back in his chair with a half-finished slice of pepperoni in front of him. "You don't have to clean up," he said when she approached. "It's either this or Dale will leave it for the morning crew," she replied, "and the morning crew will complain for 3 days." He laughed, a warm, tired sound that settled somewhere deep in her chest. She finished stacking the plates, then paused, hands resting on the table. The overhead lights had been dimmed, leaving the room soft, quiet, almost intimate. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He looked up. "Do what? Give up your promotion, your territory, your everything?" Her voice wavered slightly. "People don't do that. Not in corporate, not in real life." Eric leaned forward, folding his hands. "Laura," he said gently, "I was tired of climbing ladders that leaned against the wrong wall." The line hit her like a small, unexpected blow, not painful, but aching with truth. He wasn't proud, he wasn't heroic, he wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply honest. "Doesn't mean it was easy," he added, No, she whispered. I suppose not. He held her gaze, calm and steady, the buzz of the refrigerator filling the quiet. Around them, the restaurant felt strangely still, as if the building itself were listening. The distance between them was small, too small, and for the first time since the night they had sat accidentally at the same table, Laura felt something shift beneath her feet. Not dramatic, not loud, not certain, but undeniable. A beginning she wasn't ready to name. Not yet. The first comment came on a Tuesday morning, tossed out lightly, the way small-town people throw pebbles into a lake just to watch the circles spread. Jenna, the 17-year-old hostess with the pink hair and a habit of noticing everything, grinned as she wiped down the podium. So, Ms. Bennett, she said, sing-song, you and the little boss seem pretty close lately. Laura froze mid-stride, a stack of menus in her hand. The words were harmless, tossed with a smirk, nothing meant by them, but they hit her in the chest all the same. Don't start, she muttered, brushing past her. Jenna only laughed. I'm just saying he brings you coffee, and he smiles at you, and you smile back. That's, like, serious for grown-ups. The kid scampered off before Laura could respond. By lunchtime, two servers were whispering near the soda machine, glancing her way with raised eyebrows. And by the dinner rush, Dale had cracked a joke about corporate perks, followed immediately by an apology when he saw her stiffen. It was nothing, just teasing, just talk. Small towns breathe gossip like oxygen, harmless until it wasn't. Still, the sting surprised her. That night, as she drove home along the dark two-lane road, the radio off, the heater humming softly, old memories seeped up through the quiet like cold water through floorboards. Her divorce had started with whispers, too. At first, people thought she and Tom were just going through it. Then came the glances at the grocery store, the half-whispered theories about why he walked out. Some said she worked too much. Others said she nagged. A few muttered that a marriage only ends that abruptly when someone has something to hide. She had learned to live with the humiliation, the kind that follows a woman longer than it ever follows a man. And she remembered how alone she'd felt. Now, after years of building a quiet, steady life, the last thing she wanted was more whispers, especially whispers tying her survival to a man who'd given up a promotion for her store. People would say things. She could already hear them. Of course, the store stayed open. Look who she's cozy with. She worked the system. She used him. She knew it wasn't true. Eric knew it wasn't true. But truth and gossip had never been friends. The next week, she started pulling back. Not obviously, not rudely, just gently folding into herself the way a person does when the weather turns cold. When Eric dropped off new promotional flyers, she thanked him quickly and returned to wiping down a counter. When he asked how the Friday prep looked, she kept it short. Fine, we're on schedule. When he lingered 2 seconds too long near the salad line, looking like he wanted to say something more personal, she kept her eyes trained on the inventory sheet. She didn't mean to hurt him. She just didn't trust the ground under her feet anymore, and he felt it every inch of the shift. He didn't push, he didn't question, he just stepped back, creating space, the way a good man does when he senses a wound he didn't intend to touch. But that didn't stop the flicker of something in his eyes, something like disappointment wrapped in patience. One Thursday evening, Megan walked into the restaurant carrying a half-eaten bag of kettle chips and a look that meant she was here for something other than dinner. Busy, she asked, sliding into a booth without waiting for an answer. Laura sighed, rubbing her forehead. A little. What do you need? Nothing. Megan tilted her head, studying her. But I did see the way you were looking at Mr. Nice jawline over there. Don't, Laura warned. I'm just saying, Megan went on, crossing her legs casually. Every time he walks into the room, you straighten up like you're remembering how to breathe. Laura sat down across from her, exhausted. People are talking. In this town, people talk about everything from potholes to whether Mrs. Cartwright's cat is pregnant. Who cares I do? Laura whispered. I care. The frankness startled Megan. She leaned forward, her voice softening. Lore, you've been alone for 8 years. You work. You parent. You sleep. Repeat. You let yourself care about a man for maybe the first time since Tom, and suddenly you're scared of a couple teenagers making jokes. It's not the jokes, Laura said. Her throat tightened. It's the way it looks. The way it always looks. Like I'm taking something I didn't earn. Megan held her gaze. You earned everything you have. And if you and that man feel something, that's between you and him, not the soda machine gossip brigade. But Laura looked away, because deep down, the fear wasn't only about gossip. It was about being vulnerable again, about letting someone close enough to hurt her, about risking a quiet life she'd finally managed to make steady. And besides, Megan added with a knowing smirk, you look at him the way Mom used to look at Dad when he came home from late shifts at the mill, like she could breathe easier just because he was in the room. Laura tried to laugh, but it broke in the middle. The truth was there, raw and bright and terrifying. That night, sleep wouldn't come. She lay awake listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside, the house settling around her. Her son was asleep down the hall, older now, but still the center of every choice she made. She thought of the years she'd carried everything alone, the bills, the repairs, the birthdays she faked a smile through. She thought of Eric the way he listened, really listened, the way he gave up a rung on his ladder without bitterness, the way he looked at her sometimes, like she wasn't invisible the way she'd felt for so long. She also thought of the risk, the whispers, the judgments, the fragile balance between his job and her reputation. Her heart tugged one way, her fear pulled the other. But sometime after midnight, when the house was silent and the moon spilled pale light across her bedroom floor, a thought settled gently over her. She was a grown woman. She had earned the right to choose her own joy. Not because someone else offered it, not because life had been easy, but because she was tired of living small to make others comfortable. She turned onto her side, exhaled, and felt the tight knot in her chest loosen just slightly. Tomorrow, she would talk to him, not as an employee, not as someone begging for clarity, not as someone terrified of town gossip, but as herself, a woman who was finally ready cautiously, tremblingly to step towards something that felt like a beginning, whatever it might become. And that thought, that small, fragile decision, kept her awake until dawn. Laura stared at her phone for a long moment before hitting send. A simple message, 12 words that carried the weight of months. Are you free for dinner? Same hotel restaurant. My treat this time. She almost deleted it 3 times, but she didn't. And when the message flew off into the digital void, she sat there, hands trembling just a little, wondering if courage always felt like this. A tight chest, a shaky breath, a mix of fear and relief. Eric responded 2 minutes later. Yes. What time short? Simple. But she could almost hear the quiet surprise in it. The hotel restaurant looked exactly as it had the first night, warm lighting, dark wood tables, big windows reflecting Ohio's early evening sky. The maitre d' was the same man too, older, with kind eyes and a voice that carried a soft sense of familiarity. When he saw Laura, his eyebrows lifted just slightly in recognition. Then he glanced at Eric walking in behind her, and his smile deepened, the kind of smile people give when they suspect a story they'd never dare ask about. Table by the window, he asked. It felt almost like the table itself remembered them. The awkwardness, the confusion, the spark they hadn't understood. Laura nodded, and he led them over. No event tonight, no mistaken match, no booklet telling people to hold up a book or wear a certain color. Just them. 2 adults with complicated lives and tired hearts, trying their best. They sat. The silence was there, but it wasn't sharp. It was soft, like a question waiting to be answered. Laura folded her napkin, then smoothed its edges with steady hands. I never imagined, she began, eyes dropping to the table before lifting again, that I'd end up with my little boss sitting right across from me at the same table. Twice. His lips twitched. "Little boss?" "Hey," she said, managing a small grin. "That's what they call you?" "I'm just being accurate." His laugh eased the air between them, and she breathed a little easier. Then her expression shifted, more serious, more open. "The first time," she said slowly, "I was terrified of what you could take from me. My job, my stability, my son's college fund, everything." He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to minimize it or reassure her too soon. He just listened. "This time," she continued, voice gentler, "I'm thinking about what we might be able to build instead." His shoulders softened, the tension he carried like armor slipping away piece by piece. "Laura," he said quietly, but she lifted a hand. "Let me say this part, please." He nodded. She told him the truth, all of it, about the gossip, the old wounds from her divorce, the fear of being judged or misunderstood, the shame of feeling like any connection between them would be seen as her cashing in a favor. "I didn't want to be that woman," she whispered. "I've worked too hard. I've carried too much. And I needed to know that if I cared about you, it wasn't because of fear or desperation or convenience. I needed it to be a choice." He let those words settle, like dust in sunlight. Then he exhaled. "I've been scared too," he admitted softly, "of looking like a failure at work, of messing up with my daughter even more than I already have, of spending the rest of my life driving from town to town and realizing I never built anything that mattered." She blinked, surprised. "Eric, I'm not asking for anything big," he said. "I don't even know if big is what either of us wants. But I know that the nights I slept best this year were the nights I talked to you. And the days I felt the most human were the ones I spent in that dining room, watching people trust you without question." Her throat tightened. He leaned forward slightly. Not too close, not assuming. Just meeting her halfway. "I also know," he added, "that my job doesn't sit over yours anymore. The board made it clear, and your store is thriving because of you, not because of me. So, if you're worried about power dynamics or appearances, those aren't chains anymore." Laura felt something inside her ease, not vanish, but soften. There were still risks, still fears, still the fragile truth that two grown people carried scars that didn't disappear just because they sat at a nice table. But there was also possibility, and she was tired of letting fear make every decision for her. She slowly reached across the table, palm up, a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise. Eric hesitated only to check her eyes, making sure it was what she wanted before placing his hand in hers. Warm, steady, not claiming, just holding. They didn't make declarations. They didn't talk about the future in sweeping, unrealistic ways. They simply agreed quietly, gently to walk forward together, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Dinner came. They ate slowly, laughing about random things, burnt fries, her son's new obsession with weightlifting, the time he spilled coffee on his own laptop in a meeting and tried to pretend it didn't happen. For the first time in a long time, Laura felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, the kind that grows root by root, steady and patient. A year later, store in Shrift 14 hummed with life. Kids who once treated the job like a temporary stop now talked about management training. Regulars knew each server by name. The dining room stayed full most weekends. The parking lot sometimes needed a traffic cone just to manage the flow. And late one night, long after closing, Laura and Eric sat in a corner booth, paperwork pushed aside, a basket of cold fries between them, the hum of the soda machine, the only sound. She laughed at something he said, really laughed, and he leaned back, watching her with that easy, familiar warmth. If someone had asked her back then what she thought the most important table of her life would be, she'd have said the kitchen table at home, or maybe the tiny break room table held up by old sugar packets. But as she looked across at him, a fry halfway to his mouth and a tired smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She realized something. Sometimes the most important tables in our lives are the ones we never meant to sit at. The wrong table, the unexpected table, the table that changes everything. Sometimes, healing begins where we least expect it, at a table we never meant to sit at, beside someone we never thought would see us. Laura and Eric's story isn't really about romance or luck. It's about two people who had been carrying their lives alone for far too long, until a mistake nudged them into the same moment, the same breath, the same quiet possibility. It reminds us that second chances rarely arrive with fireworks. Often, they slip in gently through awkward conversations, shared exhaustion, or the simple kindness of someone finally listening. And maybe that's the real lesson, that courage isn't loud. It's choosing to show up again, even when your heart is tired. It's letting someone sit across from you and see who you really are. It's believing that your story isn't over, even when life feels small or heavy. We don't get to control the tables we're sent to, but we do get to choose which ones we stay at, and which moments we allow to change us. And sometimes, that's enough to start over. Thank you for being here with us, and for giving your time to a story that speaks to the quiet corners of the heart. It means more than you know. Every like, every share, every subscribe isn't just support for this channel. It's a way of sending a little more kindness out into the world, one story at a time. Thank you for helping us keep these gentle human moments alive, and thank you for choosing to listen. We'll see you in the next story.